I still remember the exact moment I realized something was off, though at the time I brushed it off as stress or fatigue. It was a Thursday morning in Dallas, early spring, the kind of morning where the sunlight slices through the blinds and makes patterns across the kitchen counter. I had made us breakfast, pancakes stacked high, a drizzle of maple syrup, scrambled eggs on the side, and 2 cans of Bud Light chilled from the fridge, because that was her thing, her little indulgence, even in the morning. She didn't touch any of it. She just stood there in her robe, arms crossed, looking out the window at the neighbor's yard like she'd just seen a ghost. "Morning," I said, trying to keep it light, and she muttered something that sounded like morning, but it lacked whatever warmth used to be there. I shook it off and ate, thinking maybe she was just tired. That was my first mistake. I'm Alex, 34, software consultant, long hours, short patience, but a heart that wore itself on its sleeve. Emily, my wife, was 29, freelance interior designer, always had this eye for detail that made our Dallas apartment feel like a magazine spread, even though I never cared much about throw pillows. We met 7 years ago at a Texas Rangers game. She was standing in line for a corn dog, I was in line for beer. She dropped her phone, I picked it up, we laughed, shared a hot dog, and somehow that led to a weekend road trip to Austin where we ate barbecue in every dive we could find. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. For the first 2 years, everything felt like one of those slow-motion movie montages, driving through hill country with the windows down, football Saturdays at the local diner, Sunday cookouts with friends where Emily always had a salad, and I grilled the steaks. She had this laugh that made people look over, the kind of laugh that made a room lighter. She wasn't perfect. She had moods, sure, and a stubborn streak, but that stubbornness was part of the charm. She was independent, opinionated, brilliant in a way that challenged me to be better, to actually try, instead of just floating through life. Then came the wedding. Not that big, flash-in-the-pan country club wedding you see in magazines. Ours was a quiet affair at the courthouse in uptown Dallas. A few family members, close friends, and Emily, in this flowing ivory dress that made her look like she belonged on the cover of Southern Living. We were giddy. I kissed her under the arch of twinkling lights, and for a moment, I felt like nothing could go wrong. I mean, who doesn't dream of that perfect day? The honeymoon was New Orleans, and for the first few nights, it was perfect. Music spilling from French Quarter bars, bourbon cocktails, street performers juggling fire. We slept late, wandered aimlessly, tried every beignet in town, and laughed at each other for eating too much. And yet, even there, the first tiny crack appeared. She didn't want to, be intimate. At first, I chalked it up to travel stress, jet lag, maybe just the hotel's weird bed. But there was hesitation in her eyes, this almost mechanical smile when I tried to hold her close at night. "It's fine," she said. "I just need a little space." When we got back to Dallas, the pattern started to solidify. She would joke about her body, her choice, whenever intimacy came up, laughing it off like it was some casual feminist mantra, but the words cut sharper than I expected. "Alex, it's my body, my choice," she said one evening, sipping on a glass of Sauvignon Blanc in our living room that smelled faintly of cedar from the new bookcase we'd assembled together. I froze, fork midway to my mouth, because I knew that line wasn't just casual banter. It was a wall. And walls, I've learned, aren't easy to break through, especially when built out of conviction rather than anger. I started noticing little things, the way she would leave the apartment for hours without explanation, claiming coffee meetings or client visits that never really checked out. Her phone was always face down, always buzzing. The friends she started bringing around were different than the ones she had when we met, louder, more flamboyant, with that subtle edge of, we do what we want, consequences be damned. I didn't say anything. I wanted to trust her. I really did. But the gut feeling kept gnawing at me, persistent, relentless. One Friday night, we had dinner at our favorite diner near Mockingbird Lane. Emily laughed with the waitress, the kind of easy, flirty laugh that used to be just for me. And while I watched, this weird sinking sensation crawled up my spine. Not jealousy, no, not exactly. More like recognition that something fundamental had shifted. She was still Emily, but she wasn't mine anymore. Not fully, not in the way I thought. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. I told myself that maybe it was just a phase. Maybe she was stressed with work. Maybe our marriage had hit a plateau. Maybe, God forbid, I was imagining things. But as I drove home that night, the streets empty, neon signs flickering, the smell of grilled onions from the burger joint mixing with rain on asphalt. I couldn't shake the feeling that something in her was quietly, deliberately slipping away. The next week, she started leaving receipts scattered around, Starbucks cups with names scribbled I didn't recognize, parking tickets for lots I had never been to, text messages from contacts labeled vaguely as consultant or friend. I didn't confront her. I just watched, cataloged, remembered. A small voice in the back of my mind whispered that ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. Then came the incident that made me stop pretending. It was a Tuesday evening. I had gone out for a quick run, and when I came back, the door to our apartment was slightly ajar. I lived on the 3rd floor, so it wasn't easy to miss. My heart thumped in a way that was equal parts panic and anger. I pushed the door open, expecting maybe a neighbor, a delivery, something explainable. Instead, I found her sitting on the couch, phone in hand, staring at it with an intensity that made her look foreign. I cleared my throat, trying to make it casual, and she jumped, too startled to cover her phone. Her eyes flicked to me, panicked for just a split second, then quickly composed. "Alex, I was just..." Her voice trailed off. And that was when I realized, whatever this was, it wasn't about stress or work. It was deeper. Something was happening behind the scenes that I hadn't been invited to, something that was slowly reshaping the dynamic of our marriage. That night, I lay awake on the side of the bed that used to feel hers, thinking about all the subtle signs I had ignored. I thought about the diner, the parking tickets, the laughter that was no longer for me, and that phrase, sharp and cold, echoing in my mind. My body, my choice. By the end of that week, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not like that. I would watch. I would gather. I would let the pieces fall into place so that when the truth revealed itself, I wouldn't just be aware, I would be prepared. I would see the cracks, follow the shadows, and document every misstep, every lie. And I knew, deep down, that when the time came, nothing about what she thought she could hide would remain secret. The final moment of that week was something out of a thriller, though at the time, it just felt like a small, mundane Tuesday evening. I noticed a text pop up on her iMessage, the little notification sliding across the screen in a way that made me freeze. I didn't read it, not yet. But my gut clenched. Something was about to happen, something I wasn't going to like, something she definitely wasn't expecting me to see. And as I stared at the message, that instinct whispered with quiet menace, "This isn't normal. There's a secret here, and it's about to explode." I didn't know what it was yet. I didn't know how deep it went, but I knew one thing. The Emily I had married, the one who laughed at football games, who kissed me under string lights, who fought over throw pillows and then made up with chocolate milkshakes, was no longer the only Emily in the room. There was someone else, hiding beneath that carefully curated exterior, and whatever she was planning, she didn't see my move coming. And that's when I realized the game had begun. Not with shouting, not with tears, not with ultimatums, but with observation, patience, and the quiet, deliberate collection of truth. I didn't know the ending yet, but I knew the opening scene had been set, and by the time it unfolded, nothing about our marriage would ever feel the same again. After that Tuesday night, I couldn't just pretend anymore. I had to know. Not out of paranoia, not for petty revenge, but because every instinct in my body screamed that something was happening behind my back. Something deliberate, calculated, and intimate. Emily didn't realize it yet, but her little walls, the ones she had been carefully erecting with "my body, my choice," were transparent to me. I could see through them if I paid attention. The first thing I noticed was her routine. She started leaving earlier for client meetings, sometimes at 7 a.m., which was unusual because she'd never been a morning person. Her car would be gone longer than necessary. I began timing her comings and goings, noting gas receipts, figuring mileage, and even checking the occasional credit card statement she left lying around. The first clue was a Starbucks receipt from a location 20 miles from our apartment. That was odd, but not incriminating, except she hadn't been working in that part of the city, and no client would require that route. I tucked it into my pocket, silently cataloging it. Next came the phone. I had never been the snooping type, but something inside me shifted. Emily's phone was always face down, always buzzed with a subtle vibration that she would immediately silence. Then one evening, when she left her iPad in the living room, her iMessage sync popped up on my MacBook. A single glance, and I saw a thread with a contact labeled only as M. And the conversation was innocent enough at first glance. Coffee, lunch, meetings. But there were subtle cues. The emojis, the timing of messages late at night, a familiarity that didn't exist between her and any other client. It made my stomach turn in a way I wasn't prepared for. I didn't react immediately. Instead, I became methodical. I started keeping a folder on my laptop labeled Emily, Observations, logging every time she deviated from her usual patterns. Late-night Uber receipts, unexplained parking charges, restaurant bills from places she claimed never to visit. Each entry felt like stacking blocks in a building that I didn't want to exist, but which, apparently, she was constructing around herself. One Thursday, a gas receipt caught my attention. She had filled up at a station on the outskirts of Plano, yet claimed she had been working at a client's home downtown. I cross-referenced the timestamp with her credit card activity, a small dinner for two at a bistro I had never heard her mention. That was the first time I felt a surge of anger, the first time the calm, analytical side of me shifted towards something more visceral. I took a picture of the receipt with my phone and stored it in my growing evidence folder. Then came the subtle lies, slips in conversation that didn't match reality. I was at a client's meeting for 3 hours, she said one evening, but my notes from the gas station, the parking app, and the nearby restaurant told a different story. The dissonance wasn't enormous, but it was enough to sharpen the edges of my suspicion. And the more I observed, the more patterns emerged. The repeated use of the word fun in text messages, references to movies or locations she claimed she had never visited, and strange new friends who were constantly appearing in social media photos, but never in real life when I was around. I started small, keeping my distance, pretending not to notice. But my internal checklist was growing. Starbucks receipts, gas receipts, restaurant bills, late-night messages, unexplained phone activity, minor lies, all pieces pointing toward an uncomfortable truth. I even set up a folder for screenshots from our shared home devices, Alexa voice logs showing her asking about locations, Google Calendar entries that didn't match anything she told me, and timestamps from our smart locks showing entry and exit times. Each file, each photo, each receipt was like a breadcrumb trail leading me deeper into a truth I wasn't ready to face. One night, curiosity overwhelmed me. Emily had gone to a networking event that, according to her, lasted 3 hours. I waited 30 minutes after she left and quietly synced our Ring doorbell to check footage from the front porch. My stomach dropped when I saw her stepping out of a sleek black SUV, not the sedan she usually drove, with a man I didn't recognize. They exchanged a long, lingering hug that lingered just long enough to make my chest tighten. I didn't confront her that night. I simply saved the footage, labeling it carefully, and sat on the couch, staring at the empty room where I had once felt safe. The following days were a mix of routine and surveillance. I didn't want to be a creep, I told myself, but the alternative, blind trust, felt more dangerous now. I started driving routes she frequently took, noting where she stopped, what shops she visited, and who she met. I snapped discreet photos of interactions that didn't make sense. A casual touch on the arm, laughter a little too intimate, small glances that lasted too long. Each image was cataloged in chronological order, cross-referenced with receipts and text logs. By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to start seeing the pattern. There were meetings that weren't meetings, dinners that weren't dinners, messages that weren't innocent. The proof wasn't just circumstantial anymore. It was a clear, undeniable web that Emily had spun, one thread at a time, without realizing I had been quietly tracing each one. I even went as far as picking up a DNA test kit from the pharmacy, not knowing what I would use it for, but feeling an irrational need to be prepared for every eventuality. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Who else knew? And most importantly, why? Then, the turning point came, a small, seemingly innocuous event that changed everything. Emily had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, a document titled Weekend Plans blinking on the screen. I glanced at it, knowing I shouldn't, but curiosity burned hotter than any moral argument. And there it was, a detailed itinerary that included names, addresses, and times that didn't match any client meetings she had ever mentioned. It was meticulously planned, almost clinical in its precision. My hands shook as I photographed each page, realizing this was more than a casual affair. It was a calculated deception that had been unfolding right under my nose. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the glow of the streetlights slicing through the blinds. My mind kept replaying every detail. The subtle refusals, the phrase, My body, my choice, the late-night departures, the flustered glances at her phone, the mismatched receipts, the ring footage. Everything pointed toward the same conclusion, but the final piece, the document on her laptop, was irrefutable. I couldn't ignore it, couldn't rationalize it away. The suspicions had crystallized into proof, and the realization was both terrifying and strangely empowering. I began to assemble everything methodically. A digital folder labeled Evidence contained photos, screenshots, receipts, timestamps, and notes. I had an analog folder for paper, restaurant bills, gas receipts, the Starbucks slip from Plano. Each item was cross-referenced, time-stamped, and cataloged. I wasn't planning an immediate confrontation, not yet. I needed to see the full picture, understand the scope, and prepare for the inevitable collision. Because when she finally realized that I knew, that I had been observing, documenting, and calculating, she wouldn't see it coming. And the strangest part? Throughout all of this, Emily continued her daily routines as if nothing had changed. She laughed, she cooked, she talked about future plans, all while weaving the narrative I had quietly deconstructed. That duality, the everyday normalcy overlaid with deception, was what gnawed at me most. It made me question every moment, every memory, every interaction. Which Emily had I married, and which one was this now? The week ended with a final, almost cinematic confirmation. I returned home early from work one Friday, pretending to have a last-minute client call nearby. When I stepped into the apartment building lobby, I saw her again, leaving with the same man from the ring footage. This time, they didn't hug. They held hands, a deliberate, visible act of intimacy that cut deeper than anything else. I didn't approach, I didn't say a word. I simply stepped back, let the elevator doors close, and exhaled slowly, realizing that my suspicion had fully transformed into undeniable evidence. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by receipts, photos, timestamps, and notes. I poured a Bud Light into a glass, staring at the golden liquid as if it could somehow make the mess of emotions more palatable. The quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the Dallas nightlife were all I had. And in that silence, I made my decision. I would not confront her recklessly. I would not allow anger or heartbreak to cloud my judgment. I would wait, plan, and ensure that when the truth finally emerged, it would hit with the full weight of certainty. Because certainty, I realized, was the most powerful leverage there is. And as I turned off the kitchen light and closed the laptop containing my meticulously organized evidence folder, I felt a chill run down my spine. This was only the beginning. Emily's next move was coming, and I was ready to see it unfold, to catch every lie, every half-truth, and every secret she had so carefully hidden. The calm before the storm had descended, but the storm itself was imminent, and when it hit, nothing about our marriage would ever be the same. Saturday afternoon, the air in Dallas was sticky with late summer heat, and I found myself standing outside Larkspur, a chic little bistro tucked into a quiet street downtown. Emily had invited me for a casual lunch, a phrase that sounded innocent enough until I remembered the document on her laptop, the receipts, the timestamps, the hand-holding with that man I didn't know. I knew exactly why she wanted to meet here. A familiar location, neutral ground, a place where she could control the narrative. I was about to flip the script entirely. Inside, the bistro was bathed in warm sunlight streaming through large windows, highlighting the polished oak tables and white linen napkins. Emily sat at our usual table near the corner, one leg crossed over the other, scrolling on her phone. She looked calm, beautiful, oblivious to the storm that had been quietly assembling in my mind for the past week. I slid into the booth across from her, setting down my briefcase and glancing casually at her before opening mine. "I thought we could talk," I said, my voice steady, betraying nothing. Emily smiled, a small, practiced smile that I recognized all too well. "Of course, honey. I wanted to clear the air. You've seemed distant lately." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I opened the briefcase and placed several items on the table: a stack of receipts, the gas and restaurant slips, screenshots of late-night messages, and even a printed photo from the ring footage. I watched as her smile faltered, her fingers tightening around her water glass. "Emily," I said calmly, "I've been keeping track. Every client meeting, every trip out of town, every text, every little deviation from the routine you've claimed to follow. I've documented it all. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence speaks for itself." Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. What What is this? She asked, a quiver in her voice that she tried to hide. This is the truth, I replied, sliding the printed document from her laptop across the table. The titled itinerary was open for her to see, addresses, times, and names that confirmed every suspicion I had been quietly observing. You've been seeing someone else, Emily, and not just casually. Emily's cheeks flushed, and she looked away, fiddling with her napkin. You're overreacting. This isn't what it looks like, she said, but the words were weak, unconvincing even to her. I reached for my phone and played the video from the Ring doorbell, showing her with the man, hugging, laughing, holding hands. The bistro was mostly empty, but a few waiters lingered near the kitchen, giving us subtle glances. The sound of silverware clinking and quiet conversation created a surreal backdrop as the weight of the evidence filled the booth. Emily's lips parted, a soundless gasp escaping. Emily, I said, my tone colder now, I didn't want this to happen here, but the time for polite conversation is over. People see what you do when they think no one is watching. I've watched, I've documented, and now you're going to explain yourself. Her eyes flicked up, and I noticed the faint sheen of tears. I didn't mean for it to, she started, but I cut her off. Don't try to gaslight me. Don't try to make me the villain here. You chose this. You chose to betray the life we built, the promises we made. She shook her head, her voice trembling now. It's complicated. You don't understand. It's not what you think. I leaned back, letting the tension hang like a thick fog over the table. I understand perfectly. You refused intimacy, claiming my body, my choice. But behind closed doors, you made choices that weren't just about your body. They were about my trust, our marriage, and the life we promised each other. Emily looked like she might crumble right there, but instead she straightened, summoning the last bit of composure she could muster. I made a mistake, okay? But you can't just parade this around. I gave a small, almost imperceptible smirk. Oh, I'm not parading it, Emily. I'm presenting it. And you're going to explain it, publicly, in front of everyone who knows us. She froze. What? No, that's insane. You can't. I had anticipated this. Earlier that week, I had discreetly invited a few people who mattered. My sister, who had been suspicious herself, our mutual friends, and even the waiter who had become familiar with our usual bistro habits. All of them were in the back, waiting quietly, recording discreetly on their phones. When I signaled, the doors opened, and they walked in one by one, all witnesses to the storm about to unfold. Emily, I said, rising, letting my voice carry, this is the life you chose to hide. These are the people who know us, the people who care, and they deserve the truth. Her face went pale, and for the first time, I saw panic in her eyes. The carefully constructed facade she had maintained for months, or perhaps years, was cracking. The tension was almost cinematic, sunlight glinting off the glassware, a faint hum from the air conditioning, the quiet murmur of diners nearby. All of it emphasized the moment. She tried to protest, to grab her phone, but my sister gently took her arm. Emily, it's time to answer, she said softly but firmly. The video played again on my phone. I watched her lips tremble, the excuses dying in her throat. The receipts, the gas statements, the documented itinerary, they were irrefutable. And now, with witnesses quietly observing, she had nowhere to hide. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered, finally surrendering. But you did, I said, my voice even, controlled. You did. And now everyone sees it. I gestured to the friends and the waiter, to the faces recording discreetly. This isn't revenge, it's accountability. The moment was sealed. Emily's eyes darted around, a mixture of shame and disbelief. She had thought her actions were invisible, secret. She had thought she could continue the charade while dismissing me with platitudes. But the public reveal stripped her of every protective layer. I felt a strange clarity, no anger, no bitterness, just a cold, focused acknowledgement of truth. She had made her choices. I had collected the facts. The world, or at least the small circle that mattered, had seen it too. Then came the final, almost surreal twist. Her phone buzzed with a text notification. She glanced down, and I caught the name, the man from the videos. She froze. The notification was a casual message. Can't wait to see you tonight. She hadn't even realized it was open for all of us to see. A laugh escaped me, low and dry. Emily's face flushed crimson. She stumbled over words, her voice barely audible. Save it, I said, closing my phone with deliberate finality. No more lies. No more pretending. You'll face this, and we'll decide what comes next. The bistro had gone quiet. The other diners sensed the tension but didn't know the story. I gathered the evidence back into my briefcase, feeling the weight of months of deception and observation finally culminating into a single, undeniable confrontation. Emily slumped in her chair, tears spilling freely now, no words left to hide behind. And as I walked out of Larkspur, leaving her in the center of the room with witnesses around, I realized one thing. The storm had broken, and nothing would ever be the same. Not our marriage, not the life we had planned, not even her perception of what could have been hidden. Because when truth finally surfaces, it doesn't knock politely. It crashes through doors, through walls, and through facades, leaving only what is real in its wake. And for the first time in months, I felt a sense of calm. The confrontation was over. The public reveal had been executed. Emily's secrets had been illuminated. Now, all that was left was the aftermath. The week after the confrontation at Larkspur felt like moving through fog. I stayed mostly at my apartment in Dallas, the one we had shared before Emily turned our home into a gallery of half-truths and whispered lies. Now, every room reminded me of what had been lost. Her laughter in the morning, the smell of coffee she never made for me, the lingering scent of her perfume on the couch cushions. Yet, paradoxically, I felt lighter. The storm had passed. The truth was out, and though it burned like acid at first, the clarity it brought was undeniable. The divorce proceedings were swift but meticulous. Emily tried to argue for alimony and a share of the assets, claiming emotional hardship and sudden change of circumstances. But the evidence I presented was airtight. Screenshots, receipts, the ring footage, and testimony from friends who had seen her behavior firsthand. My lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Marcy, who had navigated countless betrayal cases in Dallas, said, "You've got this on every level. The court will see what we all saw." And she was right. When the judge read the documented trail of infidelity aloud, Emily's smirk evaporated instantly. It was a rare moment where justice, quiet and methodical, felt undeniably satisfying. Division of assets was straightforward. The house went on the market, and I retained the condo downtown. Financially, I was unscathed, though emotionally I had to rebuild from scratch. Every Sunday, I'd drive past the neighborhood we once called ours, catching glimpses of kids playing in the yards, cars gleaming in the afternoon sun. And I realized that even in betrayal, life moved forward, relentless and indifferent. The healing process was surprisingly grounded in routine. On Monday mornings, I'd brew a pot of coffee and pour a Bud Light on the porch, not because of indulgence, but as a ritual of reclaiming normalcy. I watched the news or caught an early episode of ESPN, the steady voice of sports commentators filling the silence. I'd make breakfast, pancakes with crisp edges and butter melting down the sides. And sometimes, I allowed myself the small indulgence of crayon drawings from my nephew or the neighbor's kids, taped to the fridge, bright and chaotic in contrast to the emptiness I'd felt for months. Sleep became easier. I learned to fall asleep without replaying her lies, without imagining what she was doing at any given hour. Meditation helped, a simple routine inspired by the Carl Jung readings I had been exploring during those long nights, focusing on the self, observing emotions without judgment, and letting go of attachment to outcomes. The mantra, simple yet powerful, became, "This is not yours to carry." I started reconnecting with friends, some old, some new, who reminded me that the world was bigger than the betrayal I had endured. Lunches at diners, cookouts in the backyard, football games on Saturdays, all became symbols of normal life, life that I had almost lost to deception. These small joys stitched the fabric of daily existence back together. One afternoon, while sipping iced tea on the balcony, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was Emily's name, but I ignored it. No curiosity, no lingering pain, just a neutral awareness. In the past, that name would have sparked fire in my chest, an anxiety that kept me awake. Now, it was nothing. A ghost from the past, barely remembered. I took a deep breath, watching the sun glint off the Dallas skyline, thinking about how strange life can be. People you trust most can become strangers overnight, and yet the universe keeps moving, indifferent to your suffering. I realized that the betrayal, as painful as it had been, forced me to rebuild a stronger foundation for myself. It forced honesty where there was none. It forced awareness where there had been blind devotion. Sometimes, I still walk past the couple of diners where Emily and I had shared meals, or the coffee shop where we had our first date. I catch glimpses of the ghosts of our laughter, and instead of bitterness, there is gratitude for the lessons learned, for the clarity gained, and for the resilience that now feels innate. Life, after all, doesn't stop for heartbreak. It waits for you to step back in and reclaim it. The court documents eventually became a kind of closure. The final order of divorce read plainly: assets divided, no alimony, and both parties released from obligations. Emily, I heard, moved to Austin, trying to start anew, perhaps carrying her own burdens and regrets. I wished her no ill will. After all, holding on to hatred would have chained me to the past I was desperately trying to leave behind. Weekends turned into small rituals of joy. I started biking along the Trinity River, feeling the wind against my face, listening to the distant sounds of children playing soccer. I'd stop by a local diner, get a plate of eggs and hash browns, and watch families interact, noticing the subtleties of human connection that I had taken for granted. These mundane moments, once background noise, now felt like treasures. I even reconnected with the world of dating, cautiously, using the lessons of the past to guide me. No rush, no blind trust, just observation and measured engagement. A coffee here, a walk there, conversations that revealed character slowly over time. The world was still full of people, both good and bad, and I had learned to navigate with eyes wide open. As the months went on, the sting of betrayal dulled to a manageable memory. I found myself laughing more freely, feeling more present in conversations, and appreciating the subtleties of life. The way the sun warms the porch in the morning, the scent of rain on asphalt, the sound of a child's laughter bouncing off the walls. I started journaling again, recording not the pain, but the victories, small moments of personal growth, fleeting but profound. And then, one quiet evening, sitting on the balcony with a Bud Light at my side and the city lights shimmering like scattered stars below, I realized the final truth. Peace does not come from vengeance or spectacle. Peace comes from reclaiming your own life, step by step, breakfast by breakfast, laugh by laugh. It comes from refusing to let someone else's choices dictate your own happiness. Sometimes, the simplest gestures carry the most weight. I would make pancakes, watch the kids across the street play football, sip my beer, and feel the quiet satisfaction of survival, not triumph over another person, but triumph over circumstance. The moral was clear, as American and as simple as the roads that crisscross Texas. You can't control others, only yourself. And on nights when the past whispered, tempting me to remember the hurt, I would smile, shake my head, and say aloud, softly but with certainty, sometimes the trash takes itself out. A bitter punchline, yes, but also a truth that I could carry with pride, a lesson etched into the rhythm of my life, resonating with every sunrise and every quiet evening that followed. The marriage was over, the betrayal exposed, and the world kept turning. I had chosen my path, forward, clear-eyed, and unchained. Healing was not instant, nor was it dramatic. It was quiet, American in its simplicity, grounded in routine, reflection, and the small, concrete joys of living. And in that, I found a freedom I had never truly known before.